All right, cool. We are recording here, and for those who tune in regularly, we got a little different setup here. I'm in a hotel room here, and no Steve on today's episode, but we got Nick Flamini joining the show, who was a good friend of mine growing up here. We were just chatting about like some stories of playing basketball together in the neighborhood growing up there. But Nick, really appreciate you joining the show and like being very flexible with timing here and jumping on. I'm looking forward to chatting today. Plus, it's been forever since we had a legit conversation, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's cool to reconnect this way. So we were just telling a story where we found out that LeBron James was entering the NBA per Trevor's father, and now we're here. I don't know, however long later, and he's still playing, and it's just cool that like this all this times went by. We get to reconnect on a podcast, and I just remember that. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, man, this is really great. I'm excited to be here.
That's so nuts to think about. It really is.
It is.
Well, cool. Let's I do want to maybe just get like a general background on like who you are, what you do, general overview of the business, and then I got a bunch of questions, and
Yeah.
we can dive into a bunch of different topics here. What maybe just for the audience and anybody listening, just give a general overview of kind of like your business, what your model kind of looks like, your general elevator pitch, and then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, so the business is called Sales Tycoons. Sure, it's blocked by the mic, but it
Love
is
it.
Sales Tycoons. Yeah, our model is a two-layered model. The core function is that we provide plug-in sales teams for either underperforming or financially tied departments. And the way that we do that is we provide a commission-only model to businesses that need a more profitable and more effective sales team with the stability of a W 2 salaried employee, which is a very difficult thing to do. There's 1099 reps, there's people that source 1099 reps for commission only. There's sales teams that you all understand, which is a typical W 2 employment through the company that's hiring. And now there's a new model where we hire internally W 2 and we offer a commission only strategy for all of our partnered clients. And we fund the sales team. So we actually pay the sales team the salary and the business only pays the commission. So that's one of the core products that we have. The other one is going to be just a fractional sales management or fractional go to market strategy service.
So just to just so I follow properly there, you guys are paying that individual. Like, say you're working with, I don't know, just a random business, Nike wants to bring you in. You guys are paying that individual's salary, and then Nike is paying you based off a commission basis. So you're really like taking a lot of risk there in that situation. When
It's an
you,
ex-
for,
Yep,
first off, am I explaining that correctly?
exactly right.
When I heard that, and then I do want to get in like your content, and that's I think honestly where like this all sparked was like I just came across a bunch of your content on Instagram. You post a bunch of different reels type content, and I think that's really where um, like this conversation kind of sparked from. But when I saw your content, and then when I did a little bit more research on your business and your business model, it kind of screamed like Alex Ramosi to me of like having an offer in a marketplace that it's like I forget exactly how he describes it, but just essentially like a 10x offer. He has like some type of phrase for it where you just really need to nail down your offer where it's like really tough for a business to say no to it. Like, hey, I'm not really taking a ton of risk here. Um, where you're approaching a business, you're like, hey, you guys don't have to actually like hire anybody. Like this is a performance based model where we only get paid if you guys generate revenue essentially. Did you take inspiration from Hermosi at all with like crafting your offer and crafting the business model, or was this like a little like how did that come to be?
So I didn't pull any inspiration from them directly for this business model, but just so anyone that's listening does know, I did have a brief stint of working with the Hormozis, not with Sales Tycoons, but I was consulting, almost freelance style. But it was we had a business where we consulted health clubs. I had a few partners that would help me with that. This is pre-COVID. The business wound up not being able to be sustainable long term. I just didn't have the technical skills at the time to pivot the business from in person to online through COVID. So I wound up slowly shutting the business down, didn't pay myself for close to a year, and decided that I was going to take a break from being an entrepreneur. And I actually worked at Gym Lunch with Alex and
No
Will and the rest
way.
of the team. Yeah.
Ah, that's so cool.
Yeah, I actually helped them design their what they call now their big box program. They specialized in micro gyms, which means training facilities, CrossFit studios,
Yep.
that sort of thing. And so I came in and said, "Listen, I'll do sales, but I can also help you expand and give you the strategy that's required to help you get into health clubs." And so that department that they advertise was something that I provided for them. And I learned a lot while being there as well. You know, obviously working under them was really interesting. Didn't stay very long, not for any reason other than the fact that I had some better opportunities that came through the
Yeah.
pipeline. But when I crafted this offer and this business, it's done a little bit differently than the way that it's taught. And I think that the foundation in which Alex stands around his marketing tactics are pretty strong. I think they're really misunderstood and taken out of context, and that's had a downstream negative effect, unfortunately, in what you would define as the high ticket space. But I
Yep.
think generally speaking, what he teaches is true. It just needs to be applied much differently. And I think the way he defines it in his book, $100 million offers, is I think what you were looking for is like he calls it like the grand slam offer.
That's it. Yep.
And it's to have the value stack so high that somebody would feel almost kind of silly saying no, right?
Yeah.
And the way that we've designed it does have that feel to it. But that wasn't really the intention behind it. And so, of course, you want to make it as attractive as possible. But the way that it's really kind of taught in the book and through all of his content and what people are replicating is people are just making claims and offering guarantees without real data, without real service, and they can't honor the guarantees. And so this is something that like we do not offer a guarantee. We will never offer a guarantee. There's no reason for it. Real business doesn't need a guarantee, and it's not that guarantees are bad and that they can't be used by real businesses. If you look at the back of your ketchup bottle, there's a guarantee on it, and so they're good. The problem is that guarantees are over leveraged, okay, and typically underperforming, which means it's only used as a marketing tool. So one of the ways that we actually wanted to create a distinct offer was to provide that same sense of, hey, is this too good to be true? It's so hard to say no to it, but without actually having to guarantee anything. And the way that we did that was not by over offering, which is the context that's typically stripped from Alex's content. Alex never says to over offer. The way that he actually teaches it is 100% correct, but it gets taken out of context a lot. So what we found was that we could get that same level of buy-in through alignment. Rather than saying, we're going to guarantee you this in 90 days or less, or your money back, or we're going to guarantee you this or we'll coach you forever until you do. Rather than just making claims, what we've done is we've created alignment where if we don't succeed, if the things that we're providing, the decisions that we're making and suggesting don't work, well, then we're going to be affected just as much as you. And so this takes all of the bias out of it. This takes everything. You don't have to trust me anymore as the salesperson, or if you speak to someone on our team, you can look at the way the model is designed and understand very clearly that as strangers about to do business together, that the way that we've aligned the product is in direct congruency across the board. And this
Yep.
immediately creates trust. So they don't need to trust that we're guaranteeing anything. They know that we can't possibly do something we don't believe because we've got skin in the game. And so that's how we kind of came up with it.
Totally aligned with like incentives on both sides there.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really smart. And I think too, it's interesting you say that around like the guarantees piece because, Steve and I run, ad agencies and, in the digital marketing world. And there's just so many stories where, you know, a lot of claims in a pitch and like, guarantees and like it just muddies the water for like everybody else trying to do this. Like, I'm sure you probably deal with this when you're pitching other business owners of like, hey, I've been burned in the past from like, fractional sales teams or whatever the case may be. I'm sure you probably deal with this a lot. And it's unfortunate that that's the case because it makes like when you actually do quality work and you know, hey, we have experience, we've done this before, we can deliver. It makes like actually closing a deal, I would assume, a little bit difficult in some instances because people have just been burned in the past from like nonsense offers or claims that just don't follow through.
Yeah, so we have to turn more business away than we take on because our model is very high risk, and our competitors' models are not high risk; they're extremely low risk, which means that from a business standpoint and cash flow and scalability, they can outcompete us because they could truthfully, not saying that they do, I'm just saying on paper, they could afford to care a lot less because if their clients don't win, they've still collected the cash and they could move forward and they can make whatever claims they want on why it didn't work out.
Yeah,
We don't have the luxury of doing that because of the way that it's designed. And so we actually get more people that want to work with us, but we have a risk assessment that we have to apply in order to say, this makes sense for us to take the risk that is designed within the model to partner with you and make this happen and have a long term relationship. And because of that, our success rate's far higher. But it's a lot harder to scale because in the event we do have a cancellation, or if we lose a rep and maybe we only had one rep in a business, not like four or five where there's more stability, it has a great effect on the company that we partnered with and ours. And so for us, the model is not like blitz scale. It's not how fast can we get to 10 million, 20 million, 50 million. It's slow is fast. And
sure.
we're not trying to just inchworm our way to success, but we're not trying to blitz scale on purpose because we need to have far more stability and success in order to keep the model moving forward. Where a lot of our competitors, what they do is we'll place a closer in your business, and in the first 30 days, if they're not successful, you don't pay, which also isn't true. But that doesn't matter, right? It's like that's very easy to say yes to. And then if the account's not successful, you can still advertise this and have a tremendous amount of volume because on the backside, there's no repercussion other than reputation, which is a big deal. But most companies don't care about that currently that are in the high ticket space. We don't have the luxury to do that, and so it creates us to have to make the right decisions internally.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And it's like,
we,
you know,
we won't help a business that we don't think we can help, right? And that's
yep.
it's not just an integrity thing, even though it is. It's we will fail if we take on businesses that we don't think we could help.
And you're, on the hook for that salary. That makes total sense. Yeah, like you're setting yourself up for like, long-term success there as opposed to just getting as many clients as physically possible. What type of like industries have you guys found the most success with? Like, do you have a super niche down? Like, hey, we only work with like e-commerce companies of like this size, for example. Like I know at least like in the digital marketing world, there's some agencies who are like, hey, we're big in healthcare, we're big in B2B software or whatever the case may be. Do you
Yeah, I
have
think I
like a
think
niche
B2B
audience
SaaS
there?
and yeah, I think B2B SaaS and marketing agencies, those would be the two that are the easiest for us to comply with. However, you know, we have some B2C companies we work with. We have one that's a trading company. They sell, the ability to go through different coursework, training, live Q&As. They can work with prop agencies to learn how to day trade. It's a very interesting account. That's a B2C account selling trading systems to people that want to get into investing, and we could do a really great job there. So the reason that marketing and SaaS works for us is mainly because there's a really big problem right now with premium SMB level agencies and SaaS companies segueing into lower mid market, which has a lot to do with go to market bloat or sales team departmental bloat and high churn from reps not hitting quota. Like quota attainment's pretty close to being at an all time low. And so there's a big market for us to be able to solve those problems logistically before we deploy a sales team, as well as lower the overhead and increase the ROI per employee without that bloated salary and variance in ROI that they may be having across the board on their sales team. And that's different for every company.
Yeah.
What we find to be most successful is just the credentials, right? Like what's the average, what's the contract value, how many leads do you have, what's your current infrastructure look like? And so the assessment that we use to determine if we're going to take on business or not isn't, are you a SaaS company or marketing agency? If you go to my LinkedIn profile or something, you'll see that that's who we target. But we'll work with anyone that meets the credentials, that we require, given that we feel comfortable in the industry. So the product itself is agnostic to the industry, but we do focus on agencies and SaaS.
Got it. And then how do you vet your sales guys? Like, what does that process look like?
So
Because you're
it's a
taking
little
on a good amount of
controversial.
risk, and I would assume like
Yeah,
you got to make sure these people are killers that you're working with here, and they're going to deliver. So like, what's this vetting
yeah,
process look like?
yeah. So what's interesting is that all of these people that hire sales have crazy interview processes. They have like 3 to 5 interviews, then you have to do role play, and then you have to take a personality assessment, then you have to like match these different scoring systems, and then you get and then you're in and then you're there, and then for some reason everybody has problems. Um, we have a 2 to 3 call interview process. I like it to be two if I can. The third interview is usually some sort of actual offer, setting really,
Okay.
really, really clear expectations. But the reason I say it's controversial is because we're not resume readers. Most of the time, I get on the call and I've never even seen the resume.
Really?
I usually never. That usually comes on call two. I'll look at the
Okay.
resume, and so the reason for this is that people lie on their resume, which is what it is,
Yep.
right? And so the faster that business owners can like come to this reality, the easier they can realize that, listen, if you're a doctor, maybe even a new attorney, if you're maybe it's tech based, maybe you're doing the technical SEO work. If you're in marketing, maybe you need to prove like you have a portfolio of companies you've helped scale through an ad strategy. I think resumes are more important. So this is not, our interview process is not a strategy that's applicable to every role in a company. The problem is that in sales, it's very tough to gauge performance based off of a resume, because you're never going to call the employer and ask them what their KPIs were, if they really hit goal, if they really hit quota, if they really did any of these things. And everyone is going to tell you that they're a top performer when they're in an interview. They're never going to tell you the reason
No
why they left
doubt.
the company. And so all of these things are just arbitrary. And like the personality assessments as well, they're good when you're gauging like average success rate based off of like where somebody scores on like a disc assessment or the Colby report, which is a really popular one right now. And they're important to maybe look at a baseline. But the reality is that people buy differently as well. You're always going to have variance in buyer behavior and how different people buy based on like these 4 archetypes that we look at. And so the first call for us is to drastically shift a traditional interview process to what we frame basically as a meet and greet, where when they get on the call with us, call number one is basically what we're doing now. We're just talking. I don't really ask them too much about their experience. I don't ask them any traditional questions about business or sales. It doesn't feel like we're trying to oversell it. A matter of fact, one of the things that we go through in that first call is we try to over explain that we do not care about your resume. Okay. And that the core function of today's call is simply to set clear expectations on what we do and what you're going to expect when you come into the business. Because most people that do a first interview, they grill the candidate and then they try to sell how glorious the job is, to then get into a job and not have any idea of what the challenges are. And so we will start to talk to everyone. What do you want in a job? What do you want in your sales career? What are the things that you've just enjoyed or don't enjoy? Before we thoroughly explain what the job really even looks like here based on the accounts that we have for placement. And that allows us to do a few things. When they go first, we can figure out, okay, that's what they want, that's what they don't want. This is what they like, this is what they don't like. They're not a great fit for job A, but they could be a really great fit for job B. And so now I know not to even talk about job A as we go through the pipeline stages. And the first thing that we'll start to do after we understand them personally, know what they want, what they don't want, we'll explain the model similar to how we explained on the podcast and ask if they have any questions about how we operate as an organization. I'll let them know that most employers try to sell the job. Have you ever been on an interview where they just try to tell you all the great things? Yes. Okay, that doesn't come on this call. I want to explain to you all the things that are really difficult about working here. So that way, when you get in, you're not surprised about anything at all. And I'll tell them all the things that are really tough for us. We are a bootstrap startup, right? That means that it's entirely self-funded. We do not have a bank loan. Okay, we do not have any VCs. We do not have any angel investors. It's just all coming from me essentially. And so what this basically means is that I have to make sure that we have low churn, that people understand what's going to be difficult when they come in, what's not perfect. Startups have a little bit of chaos. And then I lay out on the table, here's all of the things that you should really consider before we even go to the next step, because truthfully, it's a great place to work. I believe. I love the model. I believe in it. But here's, before I tell you all the great things, are does this make sense? All of these
Yeah.
challenges, and we just lay them out. And usually the response is positive. Usually the response is, "This is a breath of fresh air." That is the most commonly tracked phrase that we have in our interview process. And we do about 3 to 4 interviews a day, every single day.
Oh wow.
And breath of fresh air is the most common phrase. And the reason is not because they all enjoy the challenges that we bring up, but it's the transparency that's delivered in that first interaction. So they know that we're not just trying to get them to commit to something that once they're here, they feel like, okay, I accepted a job. Looks like there's some potential, but I didn't know about this. They're less likely to leave right away because they just accepted a new position. We want them to get in there and already understand all of the challenges, so it's not a deterrence to start looking elsewhere 90 days to 6 months later, which is a very common problem for people that are being placed in different sales roles.
Yeah. It makes total sense because you'd much rather be upfront with somebody about like here's what you're getting into as opposed to it being a surprise and then they churn pretty quickly. If you
Yeah.
know going into that position, we have X, Y, and Z challenges, and like this is the state of the business, this is how things kind of generally operate here. Way better understanding of what you're getting involved in, as opposed to you kind of getting there and figuring things out week by week and be like, oh, this actually is like way worse than what I thought it was, and I'm going to
Yeah.
leave here. The other thing too that I think was interesting about what you said about not looking at resumes right away there is um, I don't know if this is like an entrepreneurship thing, but I feel like it is in the sense that like when you're running your own business and you're like dependent on you and your team to actually produce income, it kind of cuts through a lot of bullshit. It's like, did you do good service for a client and account to get paid? Like that's simply kind of like what it is. Like, did you provide somebody value where they paid you and like they consistently pay you? And I feel like entrepreneurship in that sense is a really good, I don't know, like filtration system to kind of like get to the root of an issue or um like analyzing a person, if that kind of makes sense. Like I feel like you're running your own thing for long enough. I feel like then you could start to apply um I don't know, that filter to like everyday interactions with other people to really get a sense of like I have a good understanding of the type of person they are, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And so it goes a lot deeper than just the professional aspect. It has a lot to do with your circumstances. And so everybody has a tremendous amount of luck in life. Think about, you and I grew up in the same neighborhood. We did not choose to live in that neighborhood,
Yep.
but we were lucky enough to be there. And I think that the professional workplace has that same effect, that same cause and effect through your life. Somebody may, get out of college, they have the right person that connects them to Dell. They get an account executive position at Dell. They're making 250,000. Their first couple years of sitting in a seat with a big Fortune 500 company, and at the enterprise level, and that's on their resume, and they come to Sales Tycoons and they apply, and I'm like, okay, they worked at Dell. I'm immediately thinking, okay, they worked at Dell, they were there for 5 years, it's their only job that they had since they were out of school, they're still young. But then I find out that that's an easy sales job despite the income, right?
No
That's
doubt.
super simple. There's not a lot of outbound, there's not a lot of objections. If you look at the enterprise level sales, the sales cycle's longer, but the way that decisions are actually made, or the old school saying is, nobody's ever been fired for hiring IBM.
I
And
was just thinking that. Yeah.
yeah. And so, like, is that person more qualified? Well, maybe at the enterprise level, but if they're going to come work here, have they ever really been a part of a challenger sale where they're working for a small company competing against someone like Dell or IBM, where they have to really be able to to do what's necessary with like really strong skills to get the job done? I'll just be honest, the answer is usually no. And so, you can work your way up, with smaller companies into enterprise. And I think that those are the people that usually become the unicorns. But when you get these positions early on and you have a cake role and it's just a numbers game and the board is already predetermined maybe two or three of the companies they're going to buy from, I'm not taking away from enterprise sales. I'm just saying, because there's still a lot of skill involved, it's a lot different. And if you've ever been in a sales role at any level and you're looking at notes and intake, you will, and this is where the idea came from originally. If you see that a company, let's use a small SMB size, like premium SMB, maybe they're doing like 25 million. Okay. It's like premium SMB.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll use like my last job that I was employed at before we started Sales Tycoons. We sold marketing and consulting to law firms. The revenue range that was considered qualified would be 500,000 to 750, 1 million plus. If we had a law firm that came through and on the intake form before the discovery call it said 300,000, what's the thought that's going to run through your mind?
Like if they're doing 300,000.
Yeah, so keep in mind, right? The qualification, what we would consider qualified, is a minimum of 400,000 to 750 or a million plus. And then I see a lead come through and they're doing like 250 to 300,000.
Yeah,
What
I
would the
mean,
initial thing?
like it might not meet your ICP, like it might not meet your
Yeah.
criteria that you're looking for.
Yep. And that is going to be deeply rooted into your belief prior to going into that call. And
Yeah.
so, I think it's
Yeah.
good to read notes. I think it's good to understand that when they get on the call, that you show that the team communicates from the BDR to getting to the call, that you did some research on the business before they got there. But one of the things that I learned early on for myself, not at the last role, but when I started doing sales, is I would never, ever, ever look at the amount of money the business was bringing in. And the reason for that is I didn't want to even put it in my head that there was a possibility that they weren't qualified. And as a result of that, I would find who was qualified through actually having a conversation without some predetermined emotional response going in, which absolutely will directly affect the way that you go through your process.
Yeah.
And I will tell you right now, there's no way at all that doesn't have an effect. And of course, I would get revenue early on in the calls. But once you start to speak to someone first before you get that information and learn about them, you can see why they're there or what the circumstance was. And a lot of times you'll find out that they're actually still qualified.
No doubt. Yeah. That makes total sense. I really
And
like
that
that
applies,
approach.
not to cut you off, that applies to your interview process.
Yeah. And I think
So
like,
imagine all of the candidates people throw out because they don't see Dell on the resume.
yeah,
It's wild. There's plenty of people out there that you just need to have a conversation with them and really, really listen, not passively, but really listen and understand what they have to say. And if you're experienced in hiring, you could start to figure out, okay, maybe they are lacking, but are they coachable? Or hey, maybe they haven't had a great opportunity because they seem to know far more about sales than the last five people that have had 20 years experience. And sometimes you get someone that's had 20, 30 years and they're great. I'm just saying that there's all of these, like, here's what you have to look for, credentials, and um, everyone's looking at resumes and it's just not the way for sales.
and I feel like I love the framing there because I feel like I have such a similar kind of belief system. Yeah, I feel like I'm almost like a hater when it comes to titles or resumes. Like when you're in like a meeting and it's like, hey, everybody like give an introduction, and then it's like, hey, I worked at Nike, and then I worked at Reebok, and then I worked at Adidas. First thing that comes to my mind is like, dude, you were probably on a team with like 10,000 people. Like you didn't contribute to anything. And like that business was going to success with or without you. Like you were just like riding that wave there. So like whenever it comes to like intros and stuff, like I'm very, I don't know. I'm not a big titles guy. I'm not a big like, credentials guy because there's so much gaming that could happen and so much like momentum riding in a business. There's nothing wrong with that,
Yeah.
but it's like, all right, like when we're talking about this specific topic or this go to market motion or whatever, like, can you actually contribute an idea to the conversation? Can you, do X, Y, and Z? Can you actually deliver? I've just worked with so many people that have such good like resumes and credentials. But then you work with them like, dude, this is like a normal person. Like they're not anything special. They were just
A
in a,
lot of it is
a
luck, dude.
business.
A lot of it is
Yeah,
luck
it
on how they got
really
in there.
is.
Have you ever done a group project in school when you were a kid?
uh,
It's the same
yeah.
thing.
Yep. It's so true. I wanted to that's so true. I wanted to ask you about like obviously like you're running this business, your goal is to grow the business, I would assume. How do you think about generating business? And maybe like a little extra context there. One of the things that Steve and I have chatted about a bunch on the show, Hermosi talks about it a lot, and a bunch of people that we follow is like just generating content and using content to be kind of like your top of funnel of like this was honestly one of the inspirations to starting the podcast originally was like, hey, this could be a really good format for us to generate clips for us to post on social. We definitely could do a better job of that. But like the impetus was like, let's generate some content here in this type of form and then use that as clips to ultimately generate business for us. Like that was something that we've considered. We've also chatted with a couple guests on here, and I feel like this topic has come up a bunch of like we're in a different age of like zero click marketing, if you will, where you just need to be present across all of these different platforms. And like a podcast is a really great way to do that, where you could produce content that might be perfect for your ICP. They then listen to you, be like, hey, I really like that individual. Let me learn more about their business. They then become a client of yours eventually. Um, I know you post a ton of content. That's pretty much how I came across, this conversation today. You guys have a podcast there as well. I would assume that's
Yep.
probably like a part of your strategy to generate business as content. But like, I don't know, maybe just talk a little bit about how you think about generating business and generating awareness here.
Yeah, so it could be a really deep marketing conversation, but I think that there's a bunch of misunderstandings around when and how you grow a small brand versus a big brand, and what some of the principles are that are taught at scale don't actually apply to a small business, which is why people have a hard time generating revenue fast. So content is king. This is the common theme. But I think content is king with the prerequisite of connection, which means that if you're optimizing content typically for views or likes, it's likely going to feel really good, but it's not going to yield the result that you need to actually accomplish some sort of revenue goal.
Yep.
And if you're a really large company, you have the luxury of just only branding, and you can optimize for views and likes, because branding is all about forming mental structures and mental availability, which is like if I say like a good neighbor.
Stave Arm is there.
Yeah, so that's memory recall. That's called memory recall. And if you're a brand that doesn't have any voice in the market, that sort of view optimization will maybe pay off down the road. But you're competing against brands that are like, if you're a small insurance company, good luck.
Yeah. Best of luck there.
It's going to be really tough, right? And so, do you still go after these branding efforts? The answer is yes. But what's actually going to drive revenue for a small business is very much different. And so, you have branding, which is going to help you with like the lag period of long term uh, out of market buyers that will be in market down the road.
Yep.
And then you have performance based marketing, which is a more targeted approach to bring revenue in now for people that are in market. And this goes down to a couple things. You've got like the 95-5 rule, which is not perfect. It just basically states that 5% of your market is in market at any given time, 95 is out of market. And so you do want to generate awareness to the 95% that when the time comes, you're top of mind. So,
Yep.
yes, it's important, but still with the prerequisite of connection. If you're just optimizing for views and exposure, the easiest way to do that is to put a beautiful hot chick in your video and have nothing to do with anything. You just put a beautiful girl in your video. This is just the reality of the situation. And everyone gets a little bit weird when I say that, but look at like movies, commercials, all of the content in your feed, whether you want it there or not. Like, this is just the reality of the situation. And the only people that can compete against beautiful women on the internet are people that already have massive platforms. The ones that have massive platforms did not start by optimizing for views. They started by solving specific problems that gave them social consensus over time to where they were then able to start to expand brand, right? And so content, I think, is really important, but the content needs to be curated to speak to far less people.
Yep.
And that's the trick. And so if I get engagement on LinkedIn as an example, somebody's commenting on my post. If I get one comment on my LinkedIn post is more valuable to me than 10,000 views and no comments. Because the viewership is totally unrelated to who you're trying to work with. And
Yeah.
you can't track that. It's very difficult, right? And so I think that having a content flywheel, repurposing your podcast, doing all these sort of things is absolutely something that you should do, because over time you can build an audience, and people that are maybe not in market now will say, hey, I've been following Trevor's content for a while and I've been listening to the collective and I'm now trying to figure out this thing. Well, maybe I could find out how I could book a discovery call. Right. And so the problem is, if you only wait on that strategy alone, you might not hit the revenue goals fast enough. And so I think that you have to have some sort of demand gen or performance based marketing or account based marketing strategy that's adjacent to the larger brand strategies that are being popularized, because it's easier than ever to start a business. There's going to be more competition for likes and views. It's going to be a lot harder to target the people that you want to target as third party tracking continues to diminish with security protocols being, Google's been talking about it for a long time. All of these things are going to be harder and harder and harder and harder to do as it gets easier to keep opening businesses on the internet, especially with AI. So I think that branding is going to just get harder and harder and harder. So you should do it. Don't quit, but don't rely on your revenue to come from that as a small business. You've got to get really focused in on figuring out, how can I directly identify the people that are near in market or likely in market, and go after them either with direct outreach, direct response ads, and make it happen. So I think it's always a combination between demand gen and branding, but only leveraging content for a small business could likely result in you being out of business. And so I
Yeah.
think that you have to do it, but if you wait too long just for brand to kick in, you may have an issue. And the trouble with this, and I'll just leave it here because I don't want it to be too long-winded, is that you'll find some companies that happen to just go viral right away. And like, this is like the negative effect of social consensus. Like, social consensus is so powerful because we're tribal and emotional people. And you see this with religion, politics. When you see 100 testimonies on someone's website, it's like, oh my God. But you don't understand the negative downstream effects of social consensus. It's like, if they did it, I could do it too. There's an element to that that's true. But if you understand the numbers of people that blow up a small business just from content, it's like 1%.
Oh
The
yeah.
small businesses that actually get successful and then have big brand, they start with a smaller, more direct style to get in front of an audience that's trying to solve a specific problem, which means you're never optimizing for views or likes. You're actually, you should be hoping that you only get 10 likes on your post if you're a small business, and that 8 of them are people you wanted to reach.
Yep. That makes total sense. So are you guys doing a combination of organic as well as paid, is what I heard?
Yeah, for us, LinkedIn is actually the main platform that we leverage, which
Interesting.
is frustrating. Yeah, oh yeah, LinkedIn for us is big, but it is also, I put a post up yesterday. LinkedIn is a great example of dead internet theory. If you're familiar with dead internet theory,
100%. Yeah,
it's LinkedIn,
we
dude.
talked about it.
It's just bots talking to bots.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It is so true, and it's only becoming more obvious as of late. That's something we've talked about, that internet theory on here, as well as just like general, I don't know, state of the union for LinkedIn. And I feel like LinkedIn was like ripping for a while, and then more so recently, it has gotten a different vibe to it.
I totally agree. I mean, the first thing is that they're pivoting into vertical short form content because they need to compete with the other platforms. A lot of people don't like that, but the reality is that's where people are spending their time. And I think that if they don't adapt, they're likely going to slowly lose users. So I think that, well, I don't love it. I think it's necessary, and I think that if it's done the right way and people stay focused on just business, it could be a positive thing. And I think that AI needs to be under leveraged, because right now it's being over leveraged. So if you have bots talking to bots, and this has happened in Instagram, like there's bots on Instagram and Facebook in the comments, but because LinkedIn is supposed to be a little bit more personal, the way that you connect and interact, I think it has a more negative effect
Agreed.
on what the platform's purpose was, because it's not really B2C. It's all supposed to be B2B. But we have ways around that, you know. We're very intentional with who we reach out to and connect with. And our strategy actually hinges on confirming immediately to people that we speak to that we don't use AI. That is actually the number one selling point of how we have a high connection rate and a high booking rate. It's like we go out of our way so they can tell immediately that what we're doing is not AI generated.
That's interesting. So I wanted to ask you about AI here, and I want to click into that a little bit further. Um, so I would assume it's probably a little bit um, I don't know, a little bit more sexy now, or a little bit popular, of like, hey, there's going to be like AI BDR reps. There's going to be AI built, infrastructure for outreach for these teams. When you say you don't use AI, is this more of like, hey, for our outreach process, we don't use AI. We're more for a human interaction and connection here. And then AI might be a part of your process. Like, maybe speak to me on that topic there of like what you mean by that. And then also in practice and in theory, do you guys have a POV on like, I don't know, maybe we're going to test some AI bots for business generation, first having a full, salaried human on our staff. What's your kind of like thoughts there and approach there?
Yeah. So the first thing is that we don't use AI at all, period. And it's not that we won't in the future for certain things, because I think the function of AI in the future is, because I think it's going to be, this is just a hard take. I don't know if it's actually going to happen, but I think AI is going to be regulated. I think every post, every chat, everything is going to have to be labeled as AI, because the distinction over a long period of time as it continues to progress is going to curate and create problems that exist now at a small level, but will exist at a much greater level. And when no one can distinct what's real versus what's not real, the level of distrust that will continue, because it's already happening, to rise will result in nobody getting anything done the way that they want, despite the level of speed. And so the saying that I go back to on that is that if you have a shitty strategy and just do it faster with AI, you just get shittier results faster.
No doubt.
Right. And this is gonna just result in people not believing. It's like, oh, our AI is indistinguishable. First off, it's not yet. But when it does become indistinguishable, it's just gonna make it harder for real people to connect, which means even if you are real, you're gonna get lower success rates, which is a lose-lose scenario for absolutely everyone. And so I think the solution is going to be like, hey, we use AI, but if you're in the comments, it's going to be labeled as AI. And we see that now with images that are created. But I think it's eventually going to happen with, the AI voice agents. It's going to have to happen with people that are on LinkedIn or commenting. That not everyone's going to comply, of course, but I think if you get caught doing it without labeling it, you'll probably get a penalty or be removed. That's where I think it's going to go. And that's where I hope it's going to go, because I think that's the only thing that's going to save people from being able to continue to generate real business on the internet. You can't have AI look for products for you, talking to other bots, communicating to bots, and then just hope that it's going to be the best thing. It's going to be really tough.
Couldn't agree more. I have I don't know. I feel like every single day I go back and forth on the whole AI topic of like, it's great, it's helping for productivity in certain situations. And then I'm also like, yeah, but also everything's just going to be AI'd, and it's just going to massively have an impact on, critical thinking. There's just going to be so much nonsense on the internet with
Yeah.
content. Like, I don't know. I just feel like I have like, it's tough. I'm curious to see how things play out here, but I do
Yeah,
totally
me
agree. I
too.
think like actual like labeling of content, like that's just going to be an absolute like necessity on these platforms. Do you have any thoughts on like AI versus humans and like who you'd want to employ? Of like, hey, from an ethical positioning here, like I think it's probably the right thing to do. Of like, let's support humans as opposed to let's figure out how to have like an AI BDR.
My dad used to say this about self checkout in the grocery store. He refused to use self checkout in the grocery store because he wanted to create more jobs for people. And now you have people that monitor self checkout. And so I think that to one degree, I want to keep as many people employed as possible. But to the other, I think that we continue to believe that with technological advancement, that job security is going to continue to decrease. Now, I'm not making a prediction. That very well could be the case. But I do believe that there's a possibility here that as AI advances, job opportunities that we don't even know that exist may start to populate. And so,
They're gonna
yes,
pop
some of
up.
the
Yeah,
older roles might not exist anymore, but some new things that need to happen as a result of this are going to expand, right? And so the shift of where people have to work might change, but it's just for me, I think it's too hard to tell. Of course, I'm always going to be pro people. I think that's rooted inside of us, and it should be. But as of right now, I think it's just kind of it's just hard to tell. But to answer directly for us, I'm always going to try to employ as many people as I possibly can. Especially right now, I don't think any of this stuff is really where it needs to be. I think most
no,
of the results are overinflated and they're short term. And
100%.
I could talk a lot about that. Like we've looked at a lot of the data. I think it's going to get better, of course, but a lot of the small wins you see are just because of speed, and they're just burning through things faster, and they're going to have eventually a sticking point of, well, what now? We have these really fast tools, and we've just killed the reputation from burning through people, and we got this lump sum of cash from making 10,000 calls opposed to 100 in a week, and then next thing you know, they have a revenue problem. And so I think that there's some positive wins in the beginning and some negative backlash that's yet to really kind of come out of the woodwork. But then I do think there's a future where it's going to get better and it's going to be more efficient. People are going to regulate it and realize that just doing things a lot faster all the time isn't the number one function. But you know, I do think AI is good for efficiency, so you can get other things done that are more important. I think that's probably the best use case for it right now. But in terms of job security, I mean, I would hope that we just get a little bit more responsible with how we're using it.
Agreed. Yeah, totally. I did want to ask also too, maybe switching topics a little bit here. Um, when you off the start here, you mentioned go to market, and that's been a big focus of yours. I know you also had Chris Walker on your podcast. He talks a ton
Yeah.
about. I feel like that's his main like hook is like go to market motions. What does
Yeah.
that mean? Like when people say go to market, like, hey, I'm going to focus specifically on go to market motion. Like I'm an ad, like I've ran an agency now for a while. I feel like whenever we think about go to market, it's like, what campaigns are we going to run? Are we going to run on search? Are we going to run on paid social? Are we going to have an organic content? Are we going to do SEO? Like, what is like, hey, we're like kicking things off and we're like going to go to market with, you know, whatever we're going to do tactic wise to generate business for whatever business that is. When you guys say like go to market, like what does that actually mean?
The easiest way to think about go to market is the holistic strategy between both marketing and sales, all functions involved, right? So like, what is the entire strategy? And the reason that you say go to market versus like the business strategy is because there's functions of the business that don't have to do with bringing the product to market. And so go to market primarily just refers to if you were to combine your now I would consider finance involved, but aspects of finance, marketing, and sales, and you were to lump in all of the strategies and tactics, that's your go to market strategy, right?
Yep.
So let's say that you are, if you're an agency, right, and you guys are maybe like what's an industry that you guys work with? Like, what's one of your clients?
B2B SaaS is a big one for us.
Okay, so let's say that you're working with a SaaS company that has like a new CRM and they hire you to do SEO and PPC ads. But they're
Yep.
also doing organic stuff, they're also doing content, they're also going to events. All of those other things would be lumped into their go-to-market strategy. You would be a part of the go-to-market strategy. So when people hire like a GTM strategist, they're hiring somebody to piece together the overarching like holistic playbook from start to finish from what finance should do in terms of like the decisions between those two departments, and then what are the marketing strategies at large, not just one or two things but the whole thing, and then what is sales' responsibility on the tail end of that, and how should they be acting accordingly. So it's really just like taking everything between those two and a half departments and looking at it as a whole.
That's smart. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Um, I also wanted to ask, in regards to um, in regards to your business here, I know you post a good amount of content in regards to entrepreneurship. Um, you mentioned off the start you had a venture that you then had to close down that then led to a couple other like full-time opportunities, and then obviously you're now running your own business again. What brought you back into entrepreneurship?
um, when I had my son, I think. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, that like lit just like a fire. Now I always had um, I always need a level of creativity. Even when I was employed at my last job, I was unable to just sit in the sales role and just do exactly what I was supposed to do. I would say maybe I was referred to as like a cowboy closer, where the common phrase would be like Flamini goes rogue and like he kind of does what he wants. But the truth of the matter is, I always seeked and received approval before doing anything. And I'll give you an example. Like we were mainly a Fed inbound sales team. It's like, dude, this is so easy, and I
Yeah.
was making a killing. I was doing great. But just like any sales role, there's always time on your calendar. You're not going to have 8 appointments booked every single day when there's a whole sales team that's there, and you just have 8 hours of calls and then you're done. You wake up the next day of 8 hours again. There's always white space. There's always ebbs and flows. And so, like, one of the things that I did was I asked for permission, just an example, so I could continue to keep the entrepreneurial spirit alive. Is I had a very unique outbound strategy that involved podcasting, where I asked if I could launch a podcast in the business, um, to generate more revenue and close more deals. And I gave them the strategy. They're like, okay, cool, yep, let's do it. And they let me do it. And I generated, basically just under equal what I was being fed from the outbound strategy. And so that would help me scratch that itch. Like I was involved in the creation of something, and I had that freedom to continue to have like that intrapreneur, like inside of another business feel. But I think at heart, I just have the, like, that's just what I like to create.
No
I
doubt.
had a brick and mortar gym, I had the consulting company, and now, I'm back doing this. But when I had my son, I thought I was content at you know, just doing well and not having the stress of and all the other things that comes to running your own business. And it just made me feel like I wasn't trying hard enough.
That's
And
really interesting.
yeah, the secure thing is like stay where you're at. Like you just had a baby. And what I really felt was that succeed or fail. Like I want to be able to say, like when he's like 15, that like I had to stay at my job for your security. I played it safe. I want to say, hey, this I went for it because when you were born, I wanted to be able to look you in the eye and let you know that I gave it 110% on what I wanted to actually do with my life. And I want you to do the same thing. And I think the only way that that information is taken at face value to your kids is through example, whether you fail or not. And so it's very easy for parents to say things they've never done, which is why I think that there's low compliance for kids that act out. But if you can actually lead by example and show the proof and evidence behind what you did, you could lead as a father or as a mother. It's going to hold a lot more. And so, like, when I had my son, I was like, if I want him to follow, and he might not have the same sort of dream, but if he did, I can then say, hey, when you were born, I took this risk. And look, win or fail, everything's okay. And I want you to do the same thing. So it was really for him.
Love that. That's so cool. And makes total sense there.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing too that I think you'd probably agree with is I think it's always been like a popular thing of like, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur, make a bunch of money, and entrepreneurship is pretty popular on social. I think like working for a company though is a really good option for people because you could learn a ton of shit and then go start your own thing. Where like you would have just never even thought of like, I don't know, email or paid or like whatever. Like you just don't know what you don't know. And I think
Yeah.
like there's I don't know, maybe like a connotation around like being a salaried employee. I feel like that's almost a benefit though, because it's like an education period for then when you go to start your own thing, you're like, hey, I know X, Y, and Z didn't work at my previous, full-time role, or they approach these and I would approach it completely differently. I feel like that's a really good like learning ground for your then new venture that you're going to run on your own. As opposed
Yeah.
to if you had no previous experience, it's like you're probably going to make a bunch of mistakes because you don't have the context. Like you've just never done it before.
Yeah. I think you're going to make a ton of mistakes either way, but I think
Oh, no doubt.
if it's too premature, it's way worse. And I actually think that being a W-2 employee in a great business, specifically in sales, but really with any role, is actually the right move for almost everyone.
For sure.
Unless you really, really, really need the creativity, being an entrepreneur does not actually equate to, on average, having higher income. This is totally a myth. Like if you look at the average business owner, they make less than the top salespeople in the world. It's like it's not even
Yeah.
remotely close. And so yeah, you see business owners that are like, oh, I have all this time and freedom. First off, you have freedom in a sense where if you want to do something, you can because no one can tell you that you can't. But you absolutely have less time as a small business owner. There's just no,
No doubt
there
about
is
it.
absolutely just yeah. This is the internet lie 101. If you want to run a business, be prepared to have less time, be prepared to have less money for a long time before you possibly make more money than everyone else. And, there's nothing wrong with being employed. I actually loved it. I actually love being employed. I wanted the owner at the last company. I consider him a friend. I think about it all the time. Like it was a great place to be. And I think for most people, it's just the right decision. And it's not because people are not capable of running businesses. It's just the reality of the situation is you can have the right product, the right business, the right everything, and it still not work out. And most business owners don't even want to acknowledge that. They want to, if they get to be successful, or if we eventually take off and we hit an absurd amount of revenue, I just can't sit here and say, oh, the reason we got here is because we didn't quit. Yes, that's absolutely true. And that one of the first things that you need to do to be successful is to not quit despite any of the challenges or setbacks. However, part of what got you there too is luck. And nobody wants to say, hey, I was just fortunate enough to have people that trusted me. I was fortunate enough to have employees that took the leap to help me grow the business. I was fortunate enough. No, you don't hear that. You hear, oh, if
Sure.
you want financial freedom, you've got to take control of your life, build a business. And dude, none of that is true. I worked less than 40 hours a week, had a multi six-figure income, and had no responsibility. And I made more than 90% of business owners.
No doubt
And
about
so
it. Yeah.
like running a business or owning a business is not for everyone from an egotistical standpoint. It's not a challenge. It's that quite literally, it's actually not the best option for most people.
No doubt.
I only like to be an entrepreneur because yeah, I want to make a lot of money. Absolutely, I want to make a lot of money. Do I think that we're going to do it? Yes. Right? Do I think we're on the right pace for that to happen? Yes. But the truth is that like there's so many things that people don't see behind the scenes that if they knew, they would never want to start a business. And it's just not worth the headache for most people. And unless you're aware of what that is before you do it, it's just you don't be a business owner for status to say that you own a business. It's so stupid. And I think that's one of the main reasons people want to do their own thing. I only do it because I require the creativity. I can't do that one thing every day monotonously and be totally satisfied. So for me, I get to solve problems and be creative and help other business owners solve problems, and I've got that flexibility. But if that's not the reason you're doing it, I think you're doing it for the wrong reason and
No
likely to
doubt
have
about
less
it.
success, truthfully.
Plus, too, it's also like, when you have clients, like at the end of the day, like, sure, like you don't work for anybody, but like you ultimately, answer to your clients, so like you like
Yeah.
that's like such a myth there as well. So
Oh,
it's so
dude.
interesting. I do
I
want to
had a
be
client last week. They were like, yeah, can you get into pipe drive and like build all this stuff out? I was like, guys, we don't even do that. That's not even we don't build pipe drive. That's not part of what we do. And he's like, we need this done. And it literally affects our bottom line. We had no clue. We missed this in our intake process. So I just thought about it and I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this because it needs to get done. It didn't take me long. It was actually like a 30-minute task. It didn't need to be built out. They were missing like one automation that was easy for me to plug in. But it's true, dude. You are like, you need to, when they call, you got to answer.
No doubt about it. Yeah. So like that whole
Oh,
like, hey, you control all of your time and like you don't answer to
you don't
anybody, like
control
that's a bunch of
anything.
nonsense.
Yeah, dude.
That's a
You don't
bunch of
control
nonsense.
anything.
I do want to be respectful of your time here. Dude, I feel like we could like talk for like hours. Like this like completely flew by here. I do want to ask because I tend to find when talking to other business owners, usually self help is pretty top of mind. Do you do anything that you would recommend? Supplements you take, workouts, reading books, taking walks, like you have anything along those lines that you would recommend? Saunas, like anything along those lines that you'd like recommend that's like been helpful for you just to develop in general as a person.
Yeah, I mean, I think being, bottom line, being as healthy as possible. I don't have like a rigid, like, crazy morning routine. I think that could be good. I think eat healthy, work out every day. Find ways to de-stress, find something outside of work that you're passionate about that detaches you from work so you can remember why you're living in the first place. That's another big problem in business is everyone says they love business. I think that's true and good, but I think that you've also gone so far down the rabbit hole that you forget why you're working in the first place. And so I think if you can detach from it, find some other hobby that you can enjoy and be challenged by. If you can work out every day and stay healthy and just eat the best that you possibly can, that's going to be the number one thing. I think just self care and detachment from you know your 9 to 5 or your entrepreneurial journey is is critical. And then learning, of course, like just finding different ways that you could learn.
Love that.
I
I
know it's not like super tactical advice, but for me that's kind of it. It's just staying healthy and doing other things.
No doubt. Yeah, no doubt. I'm right there with you. Dude, I feel like I could ask like so many more questions about the sales process and everything, but um,
Yeah, I mean you
maybe
can if you want. We've got some time, but it's up to you.
I all right, maybe one more within your business there. I guess like long term, what are you trying to do here? Like, is it, grow this business as big as possible? Is it, maybe launch a go to market? Like, I don't know, just generally like vision for what you're trying to do. I don't know if
Yeah.
you're, I would assume still trying to figure that out there along the way, but like long term vision.
Yeah, the crazy thing is that I think what you always think you want when you get there winds up being something different to a degree. So I do have a long term vision, but I can almost guarantee that when we start getting close to that it'll change.
Yeah.
So I think short term is that we want to hit 10 million in revenue in net new ARR, and once we get there, there's some other like layers of service and strategies that we're gonna probably deploy to make the product a little bit more robust, like full CRM builds, things that like are just accessory that right now could be useful, but would just be a distraction. Right. And so I think once we hit that mark, we're going to open up like a whole suite of things that we're going to be able to do to have just not just a plug-in sales team and fractional sales management, but all the things that you need done around sales in the future. We're already working on it on the back end. It's just we won't be ready to go all in until we hit that mark. So that's definitely something that we want to do is enhance the value with more bolt-on services that we can provide based on what people need as we continue to help them scale the sales team. And then personally, I think, yeah, it would be great. I don't really have any intention on selling the business. I would like to just build it to as big as I can without the pressure of a certain number, because I just don't think that that's necessarily fulfilling. I think just the best that I possibly can and see where it goes.
Love that. Cool. For maybe just I don't know, as we wrap here, just a quick plug, like, socials. I know you have a podcast of your own there as well. And then maybe just, your general target audience. I know you kind of hit on that to start here, but just like, if like who would be, a good fit for what value that you guys can kind of provide there.
Yeah. Typically, if you're a SaaS based company or a marketing company, anywhere between SMB to mid market, we can help you. You can find, me specifically on LinkedIn. It's Nick Flamini. You guys can see the name here if you're watching video. If not, it's F as in Frank, Lamini. It's how you spell the last name. So Nick Flamini, you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, the company Sales Tycoons. Our podcast is called Sales Architecture. So you can find us there if you want to listen to the podcast. And that's really it. So check us out. You can go to mysalstycoons.com or podcast.mysalstycoons.com to find the podcast or the website. And I think that's everything.
Cool. Well, Nick, I really appreciate it. This flew by. I feel like we could chat for like significantly longer. So maybe we run this back in the future here. I really appreciate making some time here.
I'd be happy to, man. I'd be happy to get you on with your the other host as well. I forget what was his name.
Steve.
Yeah, I would love to. Sorry about that. I would love to get on with you and Steve. I think that'd be a fun conversation. So
Hell yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. I appreciate the time. We'll figure something out, and then I'll make sure just to get all of your socials and site linked in the description here. So anybody listening who wants to reach out, got an easy place to do it. But yeah, really appreciate it. This was fantastic.
Yeah, man, I appreciate being here. I'm grateful to be a part of it, and thanks a lot.
Absolutely awesome. Thanks, y'all.